Morning light spilled gently through the apartment windows, brushing the edges of the cream-colored walls with soft gold. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and sun-warmed linen. Outside, a quiet hum of distant traffic blended with birdsong. Inside, it was peaceful, almost suspended in a gentle calm. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, a steaming mug of tea held carefully in both hands. Her favorite blanket was draped over her lap, soft against her skin. She let out a small sigh and tilted her head toward the window, watching the sunlight dance across the hardwood. It felt like a moment suspended in time. At her feet, the dog she had adopted that morning shifted slightly. He was calm, remarkably calm, but every subtle movement felt deliberate. His ears twitched as though attuned to invisible whispers in the room. His deep brown eyes followed shadows that flickered across the walls. Emma glanced down at him and smiled softly. "You're going to love it here," she whispered. Her voice was calm, almost tender. He responded with a soft nudge of his nose against her hand. Just a small touch, but it carried intention. Emma froze for a moment, captivated by the quiet awareness in his gaze. He seemed to understand her, or maybe he understood something she couldn't yet see. Slowly, he rose and padded toward the window. His movements were deliberate, measured, as if he was weighing the world outside before deciding how to feel about it. The sunlight caught the subtle curve of his fur, highlighting shades of brown and gold. He stared through the glass, tail wagging softly, just enough to show comfort, but his eyes carried something else. Something heavier. Something remembered. Emma watched him, curiosity threading through her calm morning. She noticed the way he shifted when the sunlight hit his face, how he paused at certain sounds, an echo from the street, a bird in the distance. Every twitch of his ear, every soft tilt of his head seemed meaningful. And yet, she couldn't quite put her finger on what it meant. Tentatively, she reached out her hand again. He came back slowly, nudging her palm once more before curling up beside her. His presence was grounding, steady, but there was a quiet alertness in him that made Emma's chest tighten just a little. Not fear, but awe. He was aware of everything, and yet, he trusted her. Emma took a sip of tea, letting warmth spread through her fingers. The room felt like a safe cocoon, but beneath the cocoon was a subtle thread of mystery. The dog's calmness carried a depth she hadn't expected, a silent story waiting to unfold. He lay down fully now, resting his head lightly on her lap. Emma stroked his fur gently, feeling the softness beneath her fingers. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, blinking slowly, deliberately. That gaze, it seemed to see more than just the room. More than just her. A faint sound from the street caught his attention, a car door closing. His ears twitched, his nose lifted slightly, and he rose onto his front paws. He stared at the window, fixed, focused, but calm. Emma held her breath, watching. There was a meaning in his stillness, a story in his stance. She whispered, "What are you thinking, huh?" No reply came, only the quiet patter of his paws as he circled and settled beside her once again. And then, as if sensing the moment's importance, he paused, head tilted slightly, eyes distant, almost reflective. Emma's heart ached with gentle curiosity. She didn't yet know what had happened in his life before she met him, but she could feel that there was more. Something that carried weight. Something that deserved understanding. The dog nudged her hand again. This time, it felt purposeful. Emma felt a shiver, not of fear, but of awe, of recognition, of unspoken communication. He trusted her, yet there was a story he was saving for the right moment, a story that would change everything. The morning continued quietly. Sunlight streaked across the walls, the floorboards gleamed in soft gold, and the dog rested, alert yet peaceful. Emma took a deep breath, letting herself sink into the warmth of the room, the soft rhythm of the dog's breathing beside her. And then, he lifted his head, eyes focused on something she could not yet see, and Emma felt a small catch in her chest. What the dog sensed would change everything. The quiet mystery of his calm presence lingered in the room, like sunlight that refused to fade. Emma knew, deep down, But this was only the beginning, the first gentle hint of a story that would unfold slowly, warmly, and with a depth she hadn't yet imagined. The morning stretched into late day, soft light spilling through the living room windows. Emma had moved from the floor to the couch, still wrapped in her blanket. Her tea had grown lukewarm, but she didn't mind. The world outside continued its quiet rhythm, birds chirped in the distance, a neighbor's bicycle bell rang faintly, and the subtle hum of traffic blended like music with the rustling leaves. The dog had shifted positions. Now he was near the window again, standing alert but calm. Every so often, his ears twitched, nostrils flaring slightly as he inhaled faint scents drifting in from the street. He wasn't restless. He wasn't anxious. He was attentive. Observant. Almost as if he were reading the invisible currents of the apartment and the life within it. Emma leaned forward, curiosity threading through her calm. "You're noticing something, aren't you?" she whispered. He turned toward her, tilting his head ever so slightly. Then, as though confirming her thought, he nudged a small object on the floor, a stray sock that had slipped from the laundry basket. It rolled softly across the floor. He looked back at Emma, eyes bright, expectant, gentle. Emma chuckled softly. "You really notice everything, huh?" He didn't respond with a bark. He didn't need to. His presence, his quiet awareness, said it all. He moved closer, circling her feet, pausing at each subtle sound, the creak of the floorboard, the flutter of curtains, the soft tap of a passing pedestrian outside. Every motion felt measured, meaningful. Emma's fascination grew. She had read about dogs with heightened intuition, but this was something else. Later, as Emma moved toward the kitchen to refill her mug, the dog followed silently. He stopped at the hallway, ears pricked, and sniffed the air. Emma glanced back and noticed the tilt of his head, the slight narrowing of his eyes. Something had caught his attention, a faint scent, perhaps, or a subtle movement beyond her perception. Emma paused. "What is it?" she asked softly. The dog didn't answer. Instead, he padded forward, slow and deliberate, stopping at the edge of the living room rug. He lowered his head and stared at something she couldn't see. Then, after a moment, he returned to her side, tail wagging just a little, as if to say, "It's okay. Nothing to worry about," but I noticed. Emma felt a gentle shiver run through her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't alarm. It was awe. The dog's quiet awareness, the precision of his intuition, made her feel as if she were glimpsing something extraordinary. Something subtle, almost sacred, hidden in the folds of everyday life. Hours passed in a gentle rhythm. The dog explored the apartment, circling, pausing, sniffing lightly at corners. Every motion seemed intentional, deliberate. Emma watched, fascinated by the dance of his calm movements and the quiet attentiveness in his eyes. She found herself pausing in her own routines, following his gaze, noticing the world as he did, sunlight catching a dust motes, the faint sound of a clock ticking, the soft sway of a curtain in the breeze. That evening, as the light grew warmer and the sun dipped toward the horizon, the dog lay down beside her again. He rested his head on her lap, eyes half closed, but ever alert. Emma stroked his fur slowly, noticing the subtle rise and fall of his chest. "You're amazing," she whispered. "I don't know how you see all this, all these little things that I never notice." He lifted his head briefly, gaze locking with hers. In that quiet moment, Emma felt a connection deeper than she could describe. It wasn't just trust. It wasn't just companionship. It was understanding. Mutual, silent, profound. And then, as the room grew dim with the soft amber glow of sunset, he shifted slightly and looked toward the hallway, ears pricked. His posture was calm, but his focus was unwavering. Emma noticed the faint furrow of his brow, an expression she hadn't seen before. "Something you want to show me?" she asked, voice soft. The dog didn't move. He simply held his gaze, eyes reflecting the warm light of the evening. Emma's curiosity tightened around her chest. Whatever he sensed, it was meaningful. Not urgent. Not dangerous. Just important. Emma leaned back, letting her hand rest on his soft fur. The world outside faded slightly, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the room, the gentle warmth of the evening, and the soft, intelligent presence of her new companion. It was the kind of silence that felt full. Full of possibility. Full of stories waiting to be told. Emma realized something then: he wasn't just a calm dog. He was a quiet observer, a subtle guide, a being attuned to the invisible threads that wove through the ordinary world. And as she watched him settle beside her, eyes closing slowly but attentively, she understood that this was only the beginning. The dog's intuition wasn't just a quirk. It was a window into a story she hadn't yet seen, a past she hadn't yet known, and a future she would share with him. And somewhere deep in that gentle awareness, Emma felt a quiet truth forming, a story of resilience, patience, and silent understanding that would unfold slowly, warmly, beautifully. The day ended with them side by side, sunlight now gone, replaced by the soft glow of lamps. The dog lifted his head once more, eyes catching the last gleam of light in the room. Then he rested again, calm, deliberate, and entirely present. Emma whispered, almost to herself, "I think you're going to teach me more than I ever imagined." And in the quiet, she felt it: an unspoken promise, a subtle mystery, a gentle intuition that would guide both their hearts in the days to come. The next morning arrived with a soft haze, sunlight filtering through the half-open curtains and painting the walls in muted gold. Emma was sipping her tea again, this time sitting at the small kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug. The apartment smelled faintly of breakfast, toast and coffee, but the real aroma that lingered was quiet companionship, the subtle presence of the dog resting nearby. He was curled on the rug, head resting on his paws, yet his eyes followed everything with a careful attentiveness. Every movement in the room seemed to register with him: the flicker of a shadow across the floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's footsteps on the stairs. Emma watched him, fascinated by the calm intensity of his awareness. "Are you noticing everything again?" she whispered, almost smiling at the thought. He lifted his head briefly, ears twitching, and gave a soft, slow blink, as if acknowledging her question without words. Then he returned to observing, eyes sweeping the room with quiet precision. It wasn't just attentiveness, it was intelligence, curiosity, and something deeper, something almost human in its intention. Emma felt a stirring in her chest, a mixture of admiration and wonder. She had adopted him because he was calm, gentle, and seemingly resilient, but there was something more beneath that composed exterior. Something the world hadn't yet seen, and that she was only beginning to glimpse. As she moved around the kitchen, washing dishes, he followed her with soft, deliberate steps. Not a single abrupt movement, not a bark or whine, just quiet observation, like a silent partner in her routines. Emma noticed how he paused at certain spots, sniffing lightly, tilting his head in recognition of something she could not yet detect. It was in those pauses that curiosity deepened. She found herself watching him as much as he was watching the world. She noticed the subtle ways he reacted to different textures: the warmth of the sun on the rug, the cool touch of the tile in the kitchen, the gentle sway of the curtains in the breeze. Each motion, each response, seemed meaningful. Later, when Emma sat at her laptop, the dog settled at her feet but kept one eye on her, ears flicking at every faint sound. A soft thump outside made him lift his head, sniffing the air. Emma followed his gaze instinctively, realizing she had begun to notice the world in the way he did: attentive, thoughtful, alive to subtleties that once went unseen. She laughed softly at herself. "I think I'm learning from you," she said quietly. "You're showing me things I never noticed before." He nudged her hand lightly, his soft eyes meeting hers. There was no urgency, no demand, just quiet affirmation, as if to say, "Yes. You're beginning to understand." Throughout the day, Emma observed his small behaviors, the way he shifted his paws when he sensed changes in light, the way his ears tilted toward the faintest sounds, the gentle way he circled before settling in a spot to rest. Each action carried intention, and each small moment deepened her curiosity. Evening came slowly, sunlight fading into soft amber. Emma moved to the couch, curling under her blanket. The dog jumped up beside her, laying his head on her lap as he often did. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, eyes following him as he lifted his head, sniffed the air, then turned his gaze toward the hallway. Something about the gaze made her pause. Not fear. Not alarm. Just a quiet question, something she could feel but not yet define. She leaned forward slightly. "What are you sensing?" she asked softly. The dog simply remained still, eyes focused, breathing calm and measured. Emma realized then that his intuition was not limited to physical senses. He seemed to sense patterns, histories, invisible traces of the world around him. A soft warmth rose in her chest. She felt honored to witness it, and even more curious about what lay behind those eyes, what past experiences had shaped such quiet wisdom. Night fell, and the apartment glowed under the warm, golden light of the lamps. The dog rested beside her, chest rising and falling gently, but his gaze occasionally lifted to monitor the subtle movements of the room. Emma traced her fingers through his fur, marveling at the sense of calm yet purpose he exuded. "You're more than just calm," she whispered. "You see things I don't, you feel things I can't." He blinked slowly at her, a small movement, but one loaded with meaning. In that moment, Emma understood that their bond was beginning to take shape, not through words, but through shared awareness, observation, and gentle understanding. As she turned off the lamp for the night, she felt the quiet stirrings of anticipation. This calm, intuitive dog had a story waiting to unfold, one that she was only beginning to glimpse. And though the details were still hidden, the warmth of trust and curiosity promised that every small revelation would bring them closer together. Emma lay back on the couch, eyes closing, feeling the dog settle against her side. She realized something profound: curiosity could be a bridge. A bridge between human and dog, past and present, silence and understanding. And somewhere in that shared quiet, she knew this was only the beginning. The gentle intuition of this calm dog would guide her, surprise her, and ultimately reveal a story deeper than she had ever imagined. The soft, steady rhythm of his breathing against her leg carried a subtle reassurance. Emma felt her heart open a little wider. The world was larger than her own perception, and in his quiet attention, she had discovered a partner to explore it with. And in that peaceful evening glow, she thought again, almost to herself, "I don't yet know your story, but I can feel it. And I want to understand." The sun rose slowly the next morning, casting gentle streaks of light across the living room. Dust motes floated in the beams like tiny sparks of magic, dancing lazily in the quiet air. Emma stretched on the couch, feeling the warmth of the blanket around her shoulders. The dog lay curled at her feet, his breathing steady, chest rising and falling in a soothing rhythm. Today felt different. There was a sense of calm familiarity in the room, as if they had begun to understand each other's presence without a word. Emma watched him closely. Every small movement seemed intentional: how he shifted his paws, the way he tilted his head at soft sounds, the gentle lift of his ears when a bird chirped outside. He was more than calm. He was attuned, deeply, deliberately attuned. She reached down, stroking the soft fur along his back. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to fade. It was just the two of them, quiet, warm, connected. "You're incredible," she whispered. "I don't think I've ever met anyone, or anything, like you." He nudged her hand gently, tail flicking once in acknowledgement. Emma laughed softly, a light, airy sound that felt like it belonged in the stillness of the morning. The dog had already begun teaching her patience, attention, and the quiet joy of noticing small things. As the day unfolded, Emma found herself following his lead. They moved through the apartment together in gentle harmony. He explored corners she hadn't thought to look at, sniffed objects she hadn't noticed, and occasionally paused to watch shadows shift across the walls. Each time, she felt her curiosity deepen. Each gesture, no matter how small, seemed meaningful. By afternoon, she had spread a soft rug on the floor, arranging pillows to make a cozy reading nook. The dog immediately curled up beside her, resting his head on her knee. Emma pulled out a book, but found she could barely concentrate. Her attention kept drifting to him. She studied the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the gentle way his ears twitched at distant sounds, the warmth in his eyes as they met hers. "You're teaching me to notice the little things," she said softly. "To slow down, to really see." He blinked slowly, almost deliberately, as if understanding every word. Emma smiled, realizing that their connection was growing in silence. Words weren't necessary. Trust, attention, and gentle care were enough. Later, she decided to take him outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth. The dog moved alongside her, calm and purposeful, occasionally pausing to sniff a flower or watch a leaf drift in the wind. He didn't rush. He didn't pull on the leash. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as though he were showing her a rhythm she had forgotten to notice. Emma couldn't help but laugh quietly at his quiet authority. "You really do see the world differently," she whispered. "I think I'm learning from you again." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long, soft shadows, they returned home. The dog padded ahead to the apartment door, waiting patiently as Emma unlocked it. Inside, he immediately settled near the couch, curling up as if he had always belonged there. Emma sat beside him, leaning her head against his side. The apartment was quiet now, filled only with their shared breathing and the fading glow of sunlight. Emma realized that her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. The quiet companionship, the gentle attention, and the intuitive presence of this dog were teaching her something profound. Connection didn't need words. Understanding didn't need explanation. Love didn't require drama. Evening arrived. She lit a small lamp, bathing the room in soft amber light. The dog rested his head on her lap once more, eyes half closed but attentive. Emma stroked his fur slowly, savoring the weight of his presence. She realized that her life had shifted subtly, irrevocably. His calm wisdom, his gentle intuition, and his quiet observation had begun to fill spaces in her heart she hadn't even known were empty. "You're more than a pet," she whispered. "You're a teacher, a companion, a friend." He blinked slowly, tail flicking, and nudged her hand lightly, a subtle affirmation of their bond. Emma let herself sink into the comfort of the moment, feeling the warmth radiate from him. Every soft breath, every attentive gaze, every small, deliberate movement deepened their connection. Night settled over the apartment, the room glowing in the muted light of the lamp. The dog finally curled completely at her side, eyes closing as he rested. Emma watched him, marveling at the trust, patience, and quiet understanding that radiated from his being. She leaned her head against his back, breathing in the calm rhythm of his chest. For the first time since she had brought him home, she felt a profound sense of peace. Not just because he was calm, but because she had begun to understand him and, in understanding him, she had begun to understand herself. Somewhere in the quiet, she sensed that this bond would guide her through days yet to come. It was subtle, gentle, and unwavering, a connection that required no words, no explanation, only presence. And Emma realized, with a soft smile, that she would follow this rhythm, step by step, heart by heart, discovering the mysteries and stories that lay quietly in his gaze. As the night deepened, she whispered one last time, almost to herself. "I don't know your past, or the secrets you carry, but I promise, we'll face them together." And in the warm glow of the lamp, she felt the first true sense of belonging, not just for herself, but for the two of them, bonded, quiet, and ready to share life in a way she had never imagined. The morning light filtered through the curtains with a soft amber glow, casting long shadows across the living room. Emma sat on the couch, sipping her tea slowly, wrapped in her favorite blanket. The apartment smelled faintly of brewed coffee and fresh linen. Outside, the city moved quietly, but inside, there was a peaceful rhythm, punctuated only by the soft sounds of her companion moving nearby. The dog padded quietly around the room, his movements calm but deliberate. He paused at the corner of the hallway, ears pricked, nose twitching slightly. Emma watched him, sensing the tension behind his serene exterior, a quiet alertness she hadn't noticed before. Curiosity pulled her to follow. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly. He didn't respond with a bark. Instead, he nudged something partially hidden under a small rug, a worn, faded collar, frayed at the edges. Emma picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands. Her heart tightened slightly. She didn't know the story behind it, but she felt its significance immediately. The dog sat patiently beside her, eyes watching, as though urging her to understand. Emma ran her fingers along the collar, noticing the tiny scratches and faded engraving. Something in her chest stirred. This was a clue, a small window into a past she had only glimpsed in his subtle behaviors. She leaned back on the couch, eyes meeting his. "This belonged to you, didn't it?" she whispered. He blinked slowly, almost deliberately, as if confirming her thought. Emma felt the gentle weight of his history pressing softly against her heart. The calm dog she had adopted carried stories within him, stories of endurance, of survival, of love and loss she had yet to uncover. Throughout the day, she began noticing more subtle signs. A faint scar behind his ear. The way he flinched slightly at sudden movements, but only for a heartbeat. The careful way he approached doorways and stairs, always assessing, always intentional. Each small action spoke of experiences she hadn't witnessed, of challenges he had faced quietly and with dignity. Emma moved slowly around the apartment, watching him, letting herself learn his rhythm. She realized that his calm demeanor was not born of naivety or inexperience, it was resilience, honed through moments she might never fully see. Later, as sunlight streamed through the window, he approached her with a small, deliberate gesture, a nudge toward the living room bookshelf. Emma noticed a thin notebook tucked behind a stack of books. She pulled it out carefully, flipping it open. Inside were faint, messy notes, appointments, vet visits, small scribbles that seemed to mark important days. She could feel the quiet life he had led before she arrived, a life shaped by someone who had tried, loved, and eventually had to let go. Sitting there, notebook in hand, Emma felt a mixture of awe and tenderness. This gentle dog, who had come into her life so quietly, carried a past that had left its mark, but not his spirit. He was present, attentive, and resilient. She reached down to stroke his fur, letting him feel her warmth and curiosity. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "And yet, here you are, calm, steady, teaching me patience and understanding." He nudged her hand again, eyes soft, gaze steady. No words were needed. Emma felt the connection deepen, a bridge forming between her heart and his, a bridge built on observation, trust, and quiet understanding. That evening, as the city outside began to hum with distant traffic and the glow of lamps filled the apartment, Emma settled on the couch with him beside her. She noticed how he seemed to settle differently tonight, curling close yet alert, as though ready to guide her through the story his past held. She realized that the small, gentle reveals, an old collar, a faint scar, subtle flinches, were only the beginning. Each tiny detail was a thread, weaving together a tapestry of a life she had yet to fully understand. And as she looked into his eyes, she felt the depth of trust that had formed between them, and the quiet anticipation of the story still waiting to emerge. Night fell, and the room glowed in soft amber. The dog rested his head on her lap, eyes half closed but attentive, as if aware of the gentle revelations of the day. Emma stroked him slowly, letting the warmth of the moment sink in. She realized that this was not just companionship, it was learning, understanding, and the slow unveiling of a history she was honored to witness. "You've lived a life worth remembering," she whispered. "And I promise, I'll honor it with you." He blinked slowly in response, a subtle affirmation. Emma felt a quiet shiver run through her. The dog's past was coming to light gently, without fear, without alarm, and yet it carried a weight she could feel deeply in her heart. As she leaned back, letting the quiet fill the apartment, she thought to herself, "I may not know all your secrets yet, but I will be here, with patience, with care, and with love, every step of the way." The calm glow of the evening settled over them, and Emma felt the first true sense of shared understanding, a bond strengthened by small reveals, gentle intuition, and quiet trust. The story of his past had begun to unfold, softly and deliberately, just as he had guided her to notice. And somewhere in that quiet, she sensed the promise of more, a history waiting to be understood, a bond waiting to deepen, and a future built together on trust, patience, and the slow uncovering of truth. The morning was quiet, almost sacred, with sunlight filtering through the blinds in soft stripes across the floor. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cooling in the mug before her, while the dog moved gently around the apartment, observing every small motion. Today felt different, there was a tension in the calm, a weight in his gaze that Emma hadn't seen before. He paused at the hallway entrance, ears pricked, body still yet alert. Emma noticed the subtle furrow of his brow and the careful way he sniffed the air. Something had caught his attention. Something beyond her perception. "What is it?" she asked softly, standing and following him. He didn't respond with a sound. Instead, he led her to a corner of the apartment she rarely visited, the small storage closet by the laundry area. His gaze was fixed, deliberate, full of quiet urgency. Emma's heart tightened slightly. She knelt down, watching him carefully. There, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a small, worn crate. It smelled faintly of old blankets, faint traces of the past, familiar scents the dog immediately recognized. He sniffed it, pressed his nose gently against the side, and let out a soft, almost mournful sigh. Emma reached out, touching the crate. She felt the weight of unspoken stories, of memories preserved in this quiet object. The dog nudged her hand, his gaze meeting hers, eyes glistening with the depth of emotion she hadn't expected. "You remember this, don't you?" she whispered. He shifted slightly, resting his head against her hand, pressing softly as if confirming her question. Emma felt a lump in her throat. The calm dog she had adopted carried a past full of experiences he had endured quietly, bravely, and with dignity. For the next hour, Emma watched him explore the crate, each movement deliberate and meaningful. He pulled out a faded toy, a small, frayed ball, and placed it gently beside her. Then a small blanket, worn at the edges, that he had clearly known well. Each item carried a story. Each story carried a piece of him. Emma's heart ached, but not with fear. It was awe, admiration, and a profound empathy. She realized then that the dog's calmness, his intuitive presence, had always been shaped by his past experiences. His gentle vigilance, his careful observation, his subtle gestures, they were all part of a history she was only beginning to understand. She reached down, stroking his soft fur, feeling the quiet rhythm of his breathing. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "And yet, here you are, teaching me, guiding me, without a word." He nudged her hand again, eyes meeting hers, full of trust and quiet understanding. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This wasn't just companionship anymore, it was witness. She was witnessing resilience, courage, and the profound depth of a life lived carefully, silently, and with grace. As the day unfolded, Emma noticed more of the subtle signs that pointed to his past. The way he flinched slightly at sudden sounds, the careful way he approached thresholds, the precise way he interacted with familiar objects. Each small behavior told a story. Each story added depth to the connection they shared. By evening, the apartment glowed with warm amber light. Emma settled on the couch with him beside her, allowing the quiet intimacy of the moment to fill the room. He rested his head on her lap, eyes soft but attentive, as if aware of the weight of the day's revelations. "You show me so much today," she whispered. I understand a little more now. I see your past in the way you move, in the way you notice, in the way you trust me." He blinked slowly, a subtle acknowledgement. Emma felt the bond between them deepen, strengthened by shared understanding and gentle revelation. She realized that the emotional turning point wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, subtle, and profound. It came not from words or action, but from trust, observation, and the willingness to witness another's story. Night fell, and the soft glow of the lamps created a cocoon of warmth around them. The dog curled up beside her, his presence steady, attentive, and comforting. Emma rested her head against his back, breathing in the calm rhythm of his chest, feeling the slow unfolding of his story in her own heart. She whispered softly, almost to herself. "You've carried so much, and yet you've remained gentle, patient, and full of love. I promise. I'll honor your past, and share your present, every step of the way." For the first time, Emma truly saw him not just as a calm, intuitive dog, but as a being with a history, with emotions, and with wisdom born from experience. And in that quiet realization, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The emotional turning point had arrived not through dramatic revelation, but through shared awareness, silent trust, and the gentle unveiling of a life previously hidden. The calm dog at her side had guided her to this moment, and in doing so, had taught her the depth of empathy, patience, and connection possible between human and animal. As she leaned back, letting the quiet settle around them, she understood something profound. The bond they shared was not only companionship, it was a partnership. A gentle, intuitive, deeply emotional partnership that would carry them through the remaining chapters of his story, and through the days yet to come. And as the night deepened, she whispered one final thought, letting it float softly in the warm glow of the room. "Your past, your strength, your gentle intuition, it's all part of who you are. And I'm grateful for every piece of it." The dog shifted slightly, resting his head fully on her lap, eyes closing in trust. And in that quiet intimacy, Emma felt the emotional turning point settle like a soft, golden light in her heart, proof that understanding, patience, and gentle revelation could transform connection into something truly extraordinary. The apartment was bathed in the soft golden light of late afternoon. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching dust motes in its glow, turning the room into a warm, quiet sanctuary. Emma sat on the couch, the dog curled beside her, head resting lightly on her knee. Today felt significant, like the calm before a gentle revelation. She watched him carefully. Every subtle motion, every attentive gaze carried meaning. He shifted slightly, ears pricked, tail wagging softly, and nudged her hand toward the small crate she had discovered days before. Emma picked it up, brushing her fingers across the worn surface. She could feel the weight of his history, traces of life that had been lived quietly, courageously, and alone. "Are you ready to show me?" she whispered softly, her voice barely above a breath. He blinked slowly, meeting her gaze. Then, with careful deliberation, he retrieved a small, faded photograph tucked inside the crate. It showed him as a younger dog, in a different home, with a person whose arms held him tightly, eyes full of love. Emma's chest tightened. She could see the bond, the care, and the quiet joy that had once surrounded him. And then, the photo also carried the hint of loss. Emma ran her fingers lightly over the image, tracing the outline of his former life. "You were loved," she whispered. "And something happened, didn't it?" He rested his head against her hand, eyes glistening, and nudged the photo gently. Emma understood without words. He had survived hardship. He had endured separation. He had carried the memory of love and loss quietly in his heart. She gathered more items from the crate, a small, frayed toy, a worn blanket, and a tiny collar. Each object told a story, and each story deepened her understanding. The dog's calm demeanor, his attentive presence, and his subtle gestures were all shaped by experiences that had tested him and yet had not diminished his gentle spirit. Sitting on the floor, Emma held him close, letting the warm rhythm of his breathing ground her. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "And yet, you're still kind. Still patient. Still, you." He nudged her hand, a soft confirmation, and rested his head against her shoulder. Emma felt a rush of emotion, love, empathy, and profound admiration. She realized then that the heart-touching truth of his past was not just in the hardships he had endured, but in the resilience, gentleness, and trust he carried despite it all. The evening grew warmer, sunlight fading into amber, painting the room in soft hues. Emma watched him settle beside her, curling into a circle that mirrored her own posture. She noticed the faint scars along his ears and paws, the subtle signs of his history, and felt a surge of gratitude that he had survived to find her. "You've carried all of this, and you still trust me," she whispered, voice quivering softly. That is incredible." He blinked slowly, lifting his head just enough to nuzzle her hand. Emma smiled through the quiet tears forming in her eyes. It was in this intimate exchange that the full truth revealed itself, not as a story of sorrow, but as one of courage, hope, and love endured. She gathered the photograph, toy, and blanket, arranging them gently on the couch. "Your past, it's part of who you are," she said softly. "And I want to honor it, with you, every step of the way." The dog rested his head fully on her lap, eyes half closed, breathing calm and steady. Emma stroked his fur slowly, letting the quiet intimacy settle over them like a warm, golden blanket. In that moment, she felt the full weight of their bond, the trust, the understanding, and the shared connection that had grown quietly over days of observation, intuition, and gentle care. As night approached, Emma turned on the soft glow of the lamp, bathing the room in amber warmth. The dog shifted slightly, then lay completely still, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Emma rested against him, feeling his presence seep into her heart. "You are more than a survivor," she whispered. "You are a teacher, a guide, a friend. And I promise, I will never take that for granted." He blinked slowly, tail flicking softly, affirming the bond she had already felt so strongly. Emma realized that the heart-touching truth of his past had unlocked something in both of them, a deep, abiding connection rooted in trust, understanding, and gentle love. The quiet intimacy lingered, filled with subtle warmth, soft shadows, and the delicate hum of the world outside. Emma understood that their journey was far from over, but the revelation of his past had transformed the way she saw him, and the way he had chosen to see her. In the stillness, she whispered once more, "Your story, your courage, your gentle heart, it's beautiful. And I am so glad to be here with you." The dog nudged her hand one last time for the evening, eyes closing slowly, fully at peace. Emma smiled, feeling a quiet joy bloom in her chest. The truth had been revealed, softly and gently, not through fear or alarm, but through observation, intuition, and shared trust. And as she looked down at him, curled close and calm, she realized something profound. The love between them was not just companionship. It was understanding. It was empathy. It was shared history. It was heart-touching truth, made visible through quiet presence, gentle attention, and enduring trust. The room grew darker, softened by the warm glow of the lamp. Outside, the city continued its gentle rhythm, but inside, Emma and the dog sat together in quiet harmony, hearts aligned, a bond strengthened, and a story of love and resilience fully revealed. The first light of morning spilled softly through the curtains, filling the apartment with gentle gold. Emma sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her fingers tracing the rim of a warm mug. The dog lay beside her, head resting lightly on her knee, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Today felt different, quiet, yes, but full of resolution, like the world itself was exhaling alongside them. They had journeyed together through days of gentle discovery, intuition, and subtle revelation. Each moment had brought them closer, each small act of trust weaving a bond neither could have anticipated. And now, in this still, luminous morning, Emma felt it, the quiet peace of healing, not only for him, but for her as well. She reached down to stroke his soft fur, feeling the familiar warmth radiate beneath her fingertips. "We've come so far, haven't we?" she whispered softly. He blinked slowly, eyes soft, meeting hers with the calm assurance that had guided her from the very beginning. The day unfolded gently. They moved together through the apartment in quiet harmony. He nudged her toward the windowsill where the sun streamed in brightest, encouraging her to notice the light, the shadows, the tiny details of their home. Emma laughed softly at his timing. It was almost playful, yet deliberate, as if he were showing her the beauty in everyday life. Later, she gathered the small items from his past, the worn blanket, the faded toy, the tiny collar, and arranged them neatly on the shelf. He watched, alert but calm, eyes flicking between her hands and hers. Emma realized then that closure wasn't about forgetting or erasing the past. It was about honoring it, holding it gently, and letting it exist as a part of the present. "You've carried all of this," she said softly, touching the blanket, "and yet you've remained gentle, kind, and patient. And now, you can just be here, with me, fully, completely." He nudged her hand lightly, a small, affirming gesture that spoke volumes. Emma smiled through a soft sigh. In that simple act, she felt the culmination of their journey, the full embrace of trust, love, and understanding. The afternoon light deepened into soft amber, casting warm hues across the apartment. Emma settled into the couch with him curled at her side. She leaned back, letting her head rest against his soft fur, breathing in the steady rhythm of his presence. Every past hurt, every silent story, every subtle act of intuition, they had all led to this moment of quiet, shared peace. Outside, birds sang softly, the distant hum of life carrying gently through the open window. Emma noticed how he shifted slightly, ears flicking toward the sounds, tail wagging softly. It wasn't vigilance this time. It was comfort. It was contentment. It was the presence of a soul finally at home. "I promise," she whispered, her voice full of warmth, "that we'll keep discovering, together. That your story, your heart, and your trust will always be honored. And that we'll find joy, every day, in the little things." He rested fully against her, eyes closing completely, but still alert to the rhythm of the room. Emma felt a quiet tear slide down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of gratitude, awe, and a profound sense of emotional closure. She had witnessed his journey, learned from it, and now shared it with him fully. The evening fell softly, draping the apartment in warm amber light. Emma lit a small lamp, the glow reflecting off the worn objects from his past, now resting peacefully on the shelf. She ran her fingers along his back, feeling the warmth, the calm, the reassurance of a life finally at peace. "You are home now," she whispered. "All of you, every memory, every scar, every little piece, belongs here. With me, with us." He blinked slowly, a subtle affirmation, tail flicking softly against the blanket. Emma leaned back, letting herself sink into the warmth of the room, the soft presence of her companion, and the quiet understanding they had built together. The calm, intuitive dog who had once carried a history of quiet challenges and unspoken stories now rested fully in trust, love, and comfort. And Emma, in witnessing and embracing him, had found her own sense of healing. The night deepened, and the apartment settled into complete stillness. Emma whispered one last thought as she stroked his fur. "Your past is part of you, but your present is ours, and your future will always be safe, loved, and full of warmth." He nudged her hand gently in response, curling close, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Emma smiled, closing her eyes, letting the quiet intimacy of the moment fill her completely. In that soft glow, the story reached its conclusion not with drama or fear, but with healing, understanding, and the profound beauty of a bond built slowly, deliberately, and with unwavering trust. The calm dog, once wary and carrying hidden stories, had revealed himself fully not through words, but through presence, intuition, and quiet gestures. And Emma had learned, through observation and love, to honor every part of him. As she drifted into a soft evening stillness, she whispered once more, a promise for every day yet to come. "We found each other, and together, we'll continue, in trust, in love, and in the quiet magic of life, always." And in that gentle closing, the apartment held only warmth, soft light, and the deep, unspoken bond between human and dog, a bond that had healed both hearts and would endure forever.